Good morning and good afternoon to all of our delegates. We welcome you to the South Africa-China Youth Forum for 2022. We will now start the session. Some participants are still joining, but our team will be letting them in as we proceed. My name is Rion van der Merwe. I am the Stakeholder Relations Director at the South African Association, the South African BRICS Youth Association, and it is a pleasure to be hosting all of you today. I would please like to ask you to please keep your camera and your mic off during the plenary session, just because of bandwidth, and we know that internet connectivity can be a problem. However, during the breakaway session, we will be encouraging all participants and delegates to put on their cameras to increase engagement and create a more personal atmosphere. As you can see today, we have a very diverse set of participants and delegates from both South Africa and China. And if you've been looking at the chat, you'll see that delegates come from a wide range of sectors in society, including youth leadership organizations, the private sector, universities, as well as government and public sector. The intention of this is, of course, to create a very conducive space for dialogue that is diverse and rigorous on the 4 topics of the forum. So I would like to then start the forum by sharing a program with us for today's session. So today's program is going to start with an opening and a welcome, and this will be followed by remarks from the National Youth Development Agency, a representative which will be introduced. We will then have remarks from a representative from the BRICS Directorate at the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. And this will conclude the plenary component of our session today. There will then be a short technical break, and this will be followed by a round of discussion sessions. There will be 3 rounds, focusing specifically on the topic that you have been allocated for this session. All of you should have received an email before this session highlighting which working group you will be participating in. We have a team of capable facilitators who will be guiding our discussions in those groups, and I will be introducing them to you a bit later. Following that, we will then close off the forum and also highlight some of the ways forward that we will be engaged in as the South Africa-China Youth Forum. So without any further ado, I'm then going to jump into our opening remarks. Herewith, I open the forum and I welcome all of you, and I look forward to having an engaging discussion and session with all of you. I would then like to call to the floor Ms. Karabo Mohale, who is the Deputy Chair of the Board of the National Youth Development Agency in South Africa. She is also the Deputy Chair of the South African BRICS Youth Association. And in that regard, we are very privileged to have such a prolific young leader leading our organization and our team. So Ms. Mohale, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rion, and welcome to all of the delegates. I think you've literally put me, in the deep end, especially because my responsibility was just to say welcome, good morning, good afternoon, evening from wherever young people are, tuning from. But let me just take this opportunity, I think, to welcome our distinguished guest from the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, represented by Mr. Sydney, who is going to be delivering our keynote for today. So he is going to be the one that is going to be taking us through the topic that we're discussing over, which is how we then understand our relations with China. We want to appreciate as well the investment that they're making towards the development of young people. Knowledge and education for us forms the basic fundamentals of how we should interpret and even understand development. And that commitment for us signals quite a lot on the part of government. It's always quite weird because I'm also a part of government now, so I'm going to be dipping in and out of my two heads, which is, the deputy chairperson of the National Youth Development Agency, as well as the deputy chairperson of the South African BRICS Youth Association. So we really just want to thank them for, investing in young people. We do know and have an appreciation that this session is going to be full of knowledge. It's going to be quite exciting. We're going to be learning new things. We're going to be challenging our minds. We're going to be challenging ourselves to start thinking outside of the box, to start thinking around what are some of the solutions that we can be able to bring forth as young people. We also just want to thank these young people, our very distinguished guests that have joined us, having chosen to be the change that they want to see in society, having chosen to be the voices, of the youth, and to be able to amplify some of the challenges that young people face. But beyond that, also saying what are some of the interventions that we can be able to bring in place to resolve some of these disparities that are there in society. The responsibility we all carry on our shoulders is quite immense, because we expect that post this dialogue, we make an effort to share the information and the knowledge that we would have gained today with others. One person always says that knowledge is not knowledge until you share it with others. So we want to challenge the young people that are joining here today, that whatever it is that they learn, however small, however big, it becomes important for them to pay it forward, for them to be able to share it with other young people. We want to say to them that never be afraid to sharpen others. Our lights do not shine any less, nor do they get any dimmer just because we light up other people. So we expect this platform really to motivate and employ on us as young people to bring others along by sharing information. As we would have said, today's dialogue will focus on the priorities of the China 2022 BRICS presidency and how we can be able to set a common youth agenda. It really must present a blueprint about the economy and a society we want to reimagine, especially as young people coming from very diverse and different backgrounds. How do we imagine a world that we build on mutual respect and mutual cooperation? A world that recognizes the rights and responsibility that we have towards contributing towards coexistence. I think we need to be able to understand, as young people that come from South Africa, as young people that come from China, that we don't live in islands. We're not islands where we're isolated. We need to be able to build relations, with each other, and to ensure that those relations become mutually beneficial. We need to be able to create such platforms so that we can be able to exchange ideas, exchange ways in which we have implemented certain solutions in our different communities and societies, and say, how do we as like-minded young people contribute to the growth and development trajectories of our respective countries? And China is one such a country that we need to be able to play close attention to, especially because it has been leading and it is leading in the world of cutting edge technology. So we need to start leveraging on some of these conversations. We need to start leveraging on some of these agreements that even government has, so as to open up markets for young people. I think we always say in the South African BRICS Youth Association that whatever forum it is that we create, you must be able to understand that that is a networking session. And if you're a young person who is in business and you don't get out with a customer from that session, it means there's something that you're doing wrong. If you're one young person in tech and you don't get out something that is going to assist you to optimize in terms of the technological innovations that you want to come up with, then it means you're doing it wrong, because essentially these platforms exist for us to can be able to exchange expertise, to be able to exchange knowledge, to even to sharpen each other's ideas. Sometimes you have an idea, you don't even know where to go. These platforms, you must be able to say to us that this is an idea that I have. I don't know how I can be able to sharpen it. And the group of young people that are sitting here, we can almost guarantee you that the process was quite rigorous. We have chosen some of the best young people to come and contribute to this dialogue, because we believe that then this is a blueprint of the type of society that we want to imagine. We need to be able to locate young people on the African continent at the nerve center of cutting edge technology. Young people need to drive innovation that is going to resolve some of the challenges that we have in the continent, as well as imparting some of those innovations with our counterparts in China. I know it's always quite weird, but I've got faith. I'm quite optimistic that we've got a set of brilliant young minds coming out of South Africa that can genuinely be able to put up a challenge in so far as technological innovations. We need to ensure that young people are prepared, for the shift and changes that are currently taking place in the world. We always speak about the fact that things can definitely change, in a split second. And we need to be able to build agile young people that will be able to respond to the fast-paced changing world, and not be afraid to take the bull by its horns. We need to be able to leverage on all of these partnerships that we have to ensure that we come out with constructive, real-time, tangible solutions that are going to impact the lives of the marginalized. My responsibility was really just to give the opening remarks. I'm already afraid that I'm encroaching on the time of the keynote address. But before I conclude, permit me, Rion, just to leave us with a few pointers that I think we need to be able to consider as and when we're going into the conversation that we're going to have, as and when we exchange ideas and we leverage on the partnership we have with China. For me, we need to start thinking about, what does it mean for education to be an equalizer? How do we then ensure that education becomes an anchor of the conversation that we have around trade relations? How do we have exchange programs anchored on education with China, for example, that are going to be able to assist us to build capable young people that will be able to contribute to the development trajectory? How do we understand access as an equalizer? How do we understand development as an equalizer? And I think for me, beyond and above, there are many areas that we can be able to focus on. But I'm just going to I just want to name just but a few that I think can be able to trigger some of the thoughts that we need to be able to have. So we need to start investing in technological innovation. They keep saying we live in a time that is absolutely obsessed around technology, data, all of it. And I think that's the first area that we need to start to be able to think about as and when we're having conversations. How then do we come technologically driven in our exchange with our counterparts in China? We need to be able to start thinking how we can be able to invest in human capital so that there could be trade relations around that. We know for a fact that China, gets a lot of their teachers from South Africa. How then do we able to say, let's build a cohort of young people who are sitting here that were saying we're going to be able to take them to China to go and teach English? For example, how do we have that conversation? How do we leverage, secondly, on the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, to ensure that the trade relations that we have can be able not only to benefit ourselves in South Africa, but as well benefit the African continent at large? we also need to be able to create knowledge exchange. And I think for me, the platform, this is exactly that. But we need to be able to challenge ourselves to go beyond, let's push the boundaries in as so far as the platforms that we create. We do understand that we're living in COVID and it's quite difficult for us to travel. But I can be able to guarantee you that there is value in you touching the soil of a particular country. There is value in you going to China and having a first-hand experience, on how the people in China live, what are some of the technological innovations that they have put in place to resolve their day-to-day challenges. There's also value in young people from China coming to South Africa to have real-time experience on how South Africans live, and what are some of those innovative solutions that they have put in place to resolve some of the day-to-day challenges that needs to be resolved. And lastly, facilitator, I think we need to start thinking about how we industrialize, as young people. But beyond the question of industrializing, how do we then open access to markets for young people both in China as well as South Africa? When government is taking, is making some of these commitments around trade relations, we then need to be able to ask ourselves the question as young people: where do we locate ourselves? How do we locate ourselves? And how are we able to ensure that young people benefit from some of these relations that we would have built with the people of China? But as I conclude, program director, I think we have a responsibility to put interventions in place that will not deepen the crisis that we might find ourselves in, but really to intensify collaborative efforts towards building, a new. I'm sorry about that, program director. How do we ensure that we build, collaborative efforts that are mutually beneficial and that will be able to see both young people in China and South Africa being elevated to be, at the center stage, of bringing about, change in their immediate communities, bringing about change in their immediate economies. I really think that young people, are the face of development. Young people are the face of the innovation that we want to see. And I think we need to be intentional in how we locate young people. We need to be intentional in how we invest in young people. We need to be intentional, in some of these dialogues that we even have, that even if as ourselves as young people, we sign agreements, I think for me that would be very progressive, that you not only wait for government to put certain things in place, but we're able to say the South African BRICS Youth Association as an organization in South Africa, we identify like-minded, organization and association in China, and we're able to sign our own agreements around how we can be able to mutually benefit from our existence in our respective countries. So with those few words, program director, I want to wish the participants well. I want to wish the participants, fruitful engagements. I really hope that they go in open-minded, but also beyond them being open-minded, they actually challenge the barriers. They actually challenge how we understand trade relations, how we locate young people in those trade relations. I know for a fact that, for example, even if you look at the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, doesn't speak about young people, doesn't speak about it can locate young people at the nerve center of trade. And I think this is the platform that then starts to challenge even the trade relation that we have, between South Africa and China. How do we locate young people? Where are young people in that particular, agreement that we have? So with those few words, I want to wish them all of the best and really hope that this brings out, tangible solutions that can be able to change the life and landscape of young people in South Africa and in China. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Mohale, for those very pressing remarks. I think I would just like to echo the idea of youth actually taking ownership of the relationship between South Africa and China. And of course, Sabia is engaged in building strong relationships with many youth organizations within China, as well as other BRICS nations, towards that specific end. And I would like delegates to also reflect on the fact that this space itself is a manifestation of that and that initiative. So thank you so much for those remarks. I think I will then, without further ado, give the floor over to our keynote speaker, who will be commenting on the priorities for the relationship between South Africa and China. I remind us that today our topics that we'll be covering are subtopics under the broader theme of the China presidency, setting a common youth agenda. Our 4 subtopics include the COVID-19 response and post-pandemic recovery in the Global South, climate change action and change within the Global South and how that can be done equitably, strengthening multilateral institutions and global governance, and then of course the 4th industrial revolution and digital technology transformation. So I would now like to invite our keynote speaker. I believe that he is in the room. Yes, so our keynote speaker for today, if I can just share my screen. Is Mr. Mbulungeni Sydney Mwenda, who is part of the BRICS Directorate at the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Sabia has been developing a very strong relationship with the department, and so we appreciate the time that they've taken on a Saturday to send a representative to come and engage the youth as we engage in our own activities of building relationships between South Africa and China. And we very much look forward to your remarks, Mr. Mwenda. So the floor is yours. Mr. Mwenda, you might be muted.
Yes. Thank you very much. Can you see me? Okay, there.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm Sydney Mwenda. I'm with the Department of International Relations and Cooperation's BRICS Directorate, BRICS being Brazil, Russia, India, and South Africa. So we do not necessarily deal with the issues of China only. So we deal with the issues of BRICS in general. After nearly 3 years, the COVID-19 pandemic is still with us, albeit with decreased momentum. It is without doubt that it has made us reconsider some of our priorities to chart a way for the post-pandemic recovery. In South Africa, as with others, the starting point to recovery had to be with vaccines. As much of developing countries, especially Africa, is yet to be vaccinated. Vaccine equity helps in scaling up efforts and make COVID-19 vaccine available, accessible, and affordable. This is the reason South Africa has joined the global efforts to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 pandemic by gearing up to produce vaccines and undertake to make production and delivery capacity available for the greater good of the African continent. It is worth noting that this crisis has demonstrated the necessity of improving public health infrastructure and building capacity in vaccine delivery, especially in Africa and other regions where health infrastructure is inadequate. We have also been together with other BRICS partners in the forefront of advocating for the WTO waiver in relation to vaccine production. As we continue to tackle the pandemic, we need to go beyond humanitarian initiatives and focus on development as well by financing economic interventions to revive our economies which are facing devastation. In our case, the outbreak found a vulnerable economy, as by the time it reached our shores, the economy had already experienced 2 consecutive quarters of recession. As a result, the pandemic deepened the economic crisis, with many people having lost their jobs and many having gone without income for extended periods. The stagnation of the economy for the long period coupled with pandemic outbreak has also led to low levels of capacity utilization in the various sectors of the economy. therefore threatening to reverse decades of development progress and exacerbating poverty across the country. Given the extent of the devastation, the economic response that is now required should match or even exceed the scale of the disruption caused by using all means available to move towards recovery with resilience. There is therefore the need to reinforce the predictability and transparency and inclusiveness of the multilateral trading system, with the aim of sending a strong indication that at a time of considerable uncertainty and in the face of the fragile global economies, countries can work together. With the end of the COVID not yet in sight, we would also need to strengthen BRICS cooperation to find pathway for the post-COVID economic recovery. Chair, as for BRICS, all areas of cooperation are being utilized to address the impacts of COVID, including addressing the health, economic, and social devastation of the pandemic. The new development bank also plays a critical role in contributing to the ongoing efforts of BRICS countries to address the health and economic consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic, including by the way of emergency assistance facility of up to $110 billion, as well as the approval of the loans to the BRICS states of $4 billion, including an emergency assistance program of $1 billion to South Africa. This will be beneficial in the long run because the BRICS approach to the post-COVID recovery is framed within the context of the shared principles and values that brought the formation.
Sorry, Mr. Mwenda, the audio seems to have muted. Could you please just, thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect, thank you.
Sorry about that. As I was saying, this emergency assistance program by the new development bank to South Africa, it would be beneficial in the long run because the BRICS approach to the post-COVID recovery is framed within the context of shared principles and values that brought the formation together, including the principles of mutual respect, sovereign equality, democracy, inclusiveness, and strengthened collaboration. On climate change, historically, as you know, developing countries, especially in Africa, contribute the least of global emissions, but they continue to be the most affected by climate change and its impact. Notwithstanding, South Africa's national climate change response policy requires the country to make a fair contribution to the global efforts against climate change in the context of its national development priorities, which informs our national determined contribution. The mitigation challenge posed to South Africa is considerable, with 80% of our country's emission coming from the energy sector. Accordingly, South Africa recognizes the urgency with which it must gradually reduce its dependence on fossil fuel and move towards a carbon neutral future. Though the country remains committed to addressing climate change based on science, equity, and sustainable development, the principle of CBDR, which is common but differentiated responsibility, should therefore always be applied in this regard. According to the African Development Bank estimates, Africa requires around 20 to 30 billion per annum over the next 10 to 20 years for climate change adaptation. Building resilience and responding to climate-related disaster is expected to cost African countries 3 to 5% of their GDP annually by 2030. COP27, which will be organized in Egypt this year, presents an excellent and timely opportunity to find a long-term solution to power up Africa and make the continent more climate resilient. We are hopeful that the outcome of in Egypt will reaffirm the Glasgow resolve to pursue greenhouse gas emission cuts with a hope to contain global temperature rise within 1.5 degrees. In this regard, developed countries must follow through on their commitment to at least double their climate finance for developing countries by 2025 in order to implement the global goal on adaptation. On strengthening multilateral institution and governance, South Africa is committed to strengthening the multilateral institutions and the governance systems and global governance system in line with rules-based and international order. We acknowledge the many achievements of the United Nations and its related architecture, but its continued success and relevance will be determined by its ability to adapt to the realities of today's world, which is different from what it was at the time of its creation. As such, there is a need for all of us to play a role in improving its efficacy and working methods, as well as to improving the system of global governance through necessary reforms that promote a more agile, effective, and representative and accountable system. Despite increasing unilateralism and growth of populist and ultra-nationalist forces in the world, South Africa's confidence in a multilateral system of governance is unwavering. However, multilateral institutions like the UN must undergo transformation to remain credible, and tangible progress on reform of the Security Council is essential to better address challenges and opportunities of this century. It is, however, clear that we all may not agree on the specifics of the reform, but we can all agree that substantial progress on reform of the key organs of the UN, in particular the Security Council, is essential if we are to better address the many challenges and opportunities of today. BRICS seem to be aligned on this, as in 2021, our foreign ministers for the first time agreed on a common standalone joint statement on reforming the multilateral system. There is also an alignment in underscoring the importance of reforms of multilateral trading systems, which can open world economy for global growth, for prosperity and recovery in the face of economic stagnations. Chairperson, undoubtedly, the outbreak of the COVID-19 has resulted in society reimagining technology's critical role in how we work, learn, and live. The pandemic has not only laid bare the issue of the digital divide, but more notably altered our view of digital access as a critical component to an equitable society. We are cognizant of the fact that technology is neutral, but its impact depends on choices that we make as a country today in its application, access, and governance. Hence, it is critical for us to create digital change that is inclusive. In our country, there is a concerted effort to adopt a digital approach that can improve public service, citizen engagement, accountability, and economic opportunities. In 2018, the president launched the Fourth Industrial Revolution Commission with the aim to bring digital inclusion and empower ordinary citizens with technology-based solutions that are affordable and easy to use. This is being done with understanding that technology can support waves of change that could dramatically shift to a more efficient governance system and in a way that can accrue economic benefits and create enabling atmosphere for sustainable development, economic growth, social inclusion, and environmental sustainability. In conclusion, we are cognizant that the ever-increasing pace of innovations in areas such as artificial intelligence, robotics, synthetic biology, digital networking, big data analytics, 3D printing, nanotechnology, the Internet of Things, fintech, new materials, unmanned vehicle, as part of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, impact a whole range of activities, such as manufacturing and services, health, education, development, renewable energy, geospatial information, management, space, technology, and even warfare. That is why leveraging these technologies remains important for South Africa going forward, because these technologies are facilitated by the emergence of digital platform. There is therefore the need for reduction in entry cost for innovators, especially in Africa. We understand that while these emerging technologies from virtual to genetic engineering and artificial intelligence can transform life for the better, disparities in access to such technologies exacerbate the existing inequalities and create new shortcomings. Because history teaches us that each industrial revolution has had winners and losers in between and within nations. It is pertinent that Africa should not be left behind again in this new era. Again, the UN can play a role in regulating and creating standards for this technology through legal treaties. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mwenda, for those very pertinent remarks. We appreciate that you have delivered those remarks on behalf of the BRICS Directorate. And I think you've touched on all 4 of our subtopics, which is fantastic. And it's given the delegates very good context in relation to where South Africa stands and potential avenues for cooperation with China. Colleagues, this then leads to the final portion of our plenary session for today's forum before we move into the interactive discussion groups. But we do want to take the opportunity that we have been given by having a representative from South Africa's main youth agency here, as well as a representative from our Department of International Relations, to draw on their knowledge in a way that will enhance the quality of our discussions that we have here today. So we will have a short period of questions. We welcome any clarifying questions. These, of course, are related to the 4 topics. So COVID-19, 4th Industrial Revolution, climate change, and multilateral reform. So we welcome any questions. We will be taking hands. You should have access to the reaction tab at the bottom, where you will be able to raise your hand. We ask that you ask relevant questions directed towards one of these 4 topics, and that you try to keep your question as brief as possible to allow the speaker to respond effectively. So are there any questions on the floor for either Ms. Mohale or Mr. Muenda? Right, I see one of our delegates, Victoria, you have the floor. You can also switch on your camera.
Thank you very much, Rowan. I am going to choose to keep my camera off. My question is to the representative of Brigstock Trade from DECO. Sir, if I may try to understand, how does DECO, your office, particularly your department, prioritize the education, as well as how does your department prioritize education in strengthening and reforming global multilateral governance institutions? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. I think we'll maybe take a set of 3 questions also to allow our speakers and contributors a moment to reflect on the questions. So are there any other questions? I see one of our delegates, Riska, you have the floor.
Good morning. I just also had a question for DECO. I wanted to know, in terms of DECO liaising and agenda setting as well for the NDB, in terms of those loans that has been given South Africa, especially the emergency COVID relief loan, how has that conversation gone in terms of where priorities have been made and how disbursement of that loan has been prioritized as well as monitored? So we know that during COVID-19, South Africa acquired lots of loans from IFIs, including the World Bank. So I'd just like to really know, in terms of prioritizing and dispersing those loans, how does Treasury interact with, how does DECO interact with the NDB, as well as the African Regional Center, and then Treasury, which then disperses it down to local municipalities? So what is your role in that process, in terms of the others' agenda and priorities that you have explained here? Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Just as we wait for maybe a third last question, I also just want to highlight that the responses from our speakers might not touch on all the points of what has been asked. Of course, we know that DERCO is a very large organization, very large department, and so there are various roles and functions. And so we would just like to give Mr. Muenda the freedom to address whatever he feels he has a field of that falls within his role. And of course, there's some information that he might not necessarily be able to share with us for various reasons. I'm not seeing any other hands at this point. So I think, Mr. Muenda, if you would then touch on whatever you feel you're able to make a contribution to based on the two questions that have been asked.
Hello, thank you. I think the first question was about leveraging education. As I will answer this one based on what we deal with under the BRICS Directorate ourselves. We have, as you know, BRICS has a different tracks of cooperation, where you find political and security, economic and finance, then you get social, people-to-people kind of cooperation. That's where you can locate issues of education in our directorate, where you have countries cooperating based on their priorities of the year. For example, China this year is prioritizing issues of student exchanges and kind of university cooperation and all that, under that pillar of people to people. So when you talk about education in general within DECO, you would find it inside the United Nations branch, the UN branch political, where you find the UNESCO kind of setup where people dealing with the UNESCO would have lots of problems, because your question is general in terms of you're talking about in terms of education in general. So education is located in each and every multilateral directorate, but it varies in terms of the level of involvement. But for us, we are locating it at BRICS within the people-to-people, but we have quite a lot of programs within that track, but sometimes you have this kind of issues where South Africa is chairing next year, then you find that our priorities do not necessarily, I'm not saying they're not, you find that there's not that kind of continuity in terms of certain programs. So it is important maybe for all of us as BRICS to actually emphasize issues of continuity in a level of cooperation that we might want to see, especially in education. But on the NDB part, as you know, we have a board of directors and board of governors. And I think the board of governor, a minister sits in that board of governor. But the preparation of projects and all that is done by the board of directors. Of course, you will have to apply to access some kind of funding yourselves as a country. So based on your own priorities, you apply, whether you're declined, you are accepted, and all that. But I think your question also goes to issues of how it's being monitored, So there is some kind of monitoring, but we don't necessarily get involved in that ourselves, because ours is to actually get certain issues, to be done at the desk level, so that the others will have to take over, like the national treasurer. Also, when it comes to municipality, I wouldn't have that answer as to how it's being monitored, cascading down to your municipalities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mwenda, for those remarks. I think it's very important that we are able to engage with you on this, because many young people, even in international relations, don't necessarily know the channels and levels that you've explained now with regards to how DERCO operates. So I see we have two more questions. I think these will be our two last questions before we move on to the next part of our program. So our first question is from Makete.
All right, thank you, moderator, and greetings to all the delegate speakers. It's an honor, so thank you for inviting me. My question is going to be directed to both Sydney and Karabo, and it is also directed to our Chinese participants and delegates that are also here, because I don't want to have it directed to South Africa and have it be a South Africa conversation. So when it comes to education and reaching whether it is education opportunities or even employment opportunities, what type of programs do we have to make sure that we increase the pool of access, even for those that are in remote and rural areas? Because one of the challenges that we do have in South Africa is reaching people that are perhaps without the infrastructure that we, I guess, easily take for granted. So you do have populations in your periphery and rural areas that don't necessarily have the same kind of access that we do. So what is the NYDA or the BRICS desk at DOCO doing? Perhaps this is also a question that could be directed to the South African, the Youth Forum in itself. How have we, I guess, tried to increase access for those in the peripheral areas? And for our, like, I think it speaks to inequality, diversity, and trying to be as inclusive as possible. And therefore, even with China, because one of the divides that we see that affect Chinese youth, it is the level of inequality that is increasing, right? So how have they tried to mitigate these challenges and increasing challenges and making sure that we try to open these doors to as much youth as possible and not forget or leave anyone behind? Thank you.
Thank you very much for those remarks. I think a very pertinent question in terms of accessibility and the relationship. Of course, linking to the fourth industrial revolution conversation we'll also be having later, but touching on multiple fronts. So our next question and our final question will then come from our delegate, Kanye.
Hello, thank you, Ron. My question is directed at both speakers. Firstly, thank you very much for the very informative address. And I'd like us to emphasize just on continuity. You had mentioned it, Mr. Mwenda. And so thinking from that space, is there a specific initiative that we have started that you would allocate time to? Perhaps we've reached a roadblock and you'd want a youth perspective on. Some of these goals were set in 2010, and so we're a few years shy of 2030. Is there something that you feel we would be more impactful picking up the baton rather than starting a new initiative altogether?
All right, thank you so much. I think in this regard, I will give Ms. Mohale, who has not had an opportunity to respond yet, the first opportunity to respond to one or either of the questions, and then I will revert back to Mr. Mwenda. So Ms. Mohale, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Rion. And I really must say that a question was asked to me that was asked to the participants around how do we imagine access, especially because we need to be able to understand that, when you're speaking about development, access itself is an equalizer. The fact that one would have access to information, access to opportunities, that alone is a game changer. But then let me challenge myself, because I myself did not have the answer to that question around what are some of the interventions that the National Youth Development Agency has put in place. I think starting from this year, I think because we joined the NYDA last year, December, what we have been doing is going, moving from community to community with the NYDA, with particular focus to just share information around some of the academic interventions that are there. For example, we had an agreement, rather a conversation with the Turkish embassy that has Turkey scholarships. I think they closed sometime in February, but they reached out to us to say, look, we've got this scholarship. We don't know how to access young people in South Africa apart from Facebook. Then what do we do as the NYDA? What then becomes our role? Our role becomes that conduit of information between, people like the Turkish embassy as well as the end user, which would be young people who are located in the periphery of economic activity. But I really must say that alone is extremely difficult, because how many, communities are you going to have access to before the closing date actually comes and goes? So I think it's important for us to then start saying, how do we elevate some of the solutions that we have? When we're having a discussion, I think a few weeks back, around technological innovation, we started thinking around how in South Africa, the greatest limitation in terms of access to information is the fact that you don't have uninterrupted access to electricity, which makes it difficult for you to even try and put, interventions in place where young people can be able to have access to information. What we do know is that the NYDA website is what they call free in terms of data. So you don't need to have data to have access to the NYDA website. But what happens when you're sitting in a community where you don't even have electricity? It becomes difficult because even the device that you would want to use to have access to that zero-rated website is actually limited. Then we need to start challenging ourselves as young people to say, how do we play a critical role in energy generation? There is a conversation that is currently taking place, and this is a challenge that I'm posing to young people. There is a conversation that is currently taking place, not just in South Africa alone, but it stemmed from COP26 around just transition from coal-powered energy to what they call free and safer energy or greener solutions, and that is solar-powered energy. How then do we start saying, young people must develop a solar-powered laptop, where for a fact that in South Africa, we've got access to the sun, from January to January, there's never a day where you don't have access to the sun. Then you would have resolved a challenge that is posed by Eskom and its load shedding. And you must be able to understand, when you're speaking about load shedding, you must also check our privilege. When you're in the city, you have a timetable that tells you that at 9:30, you won't have electricity for the next 45 minutes. While in the villages, electricity literally goes for a whole entire month. That is their type of load shedding. So I think we then need to start thinking, how then do we elevate the type of solutions that we want to bring on board, looking at the broader challenges and the material conditions that many South Africans find themselves in. South Africa is the most unequal country in the world. This is the report. Well, it has been there. I think our Gini coefficient has been sitting as 0.6, so I think we just need to be able to start thinking, when do we challenge ourselves with regard to some of the solutions that we're putting forth. I think the next question will be answered by Mr. Sydney. Thank you very much for the question.
Thank you, Ms. Mohale. Then Mr. Mwenda, over to you, perhaps to answer the remaining question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, thank you for the questions. The question about continuity and its impactfulness. I think to tell the truth, there should be many expectations from BRICS as an organization, because one should also understand that BRICS represents not just political configuration, but the economic potential. It has a serious economic potential to give a greater voice to all of the developing countries, especially here in Africa. The young population of South Africa has had to face many challenges, really, during this pandemic in matters of education, training, and finding decent jobs. So there's also issue of mental well-being of the youth. We need to be able to continue those things and be consistent all the time as BRICS, and also focus, given the topic that you just gave us on the fourth industrial revolution. So we need to be serious about this issue of the digital divide that we are experiencing, especially in developing countries, particularly in Africa. So the issue of digital divide should, at least in my own liking, I would love for it to just be a continuous priority, because without that, there is going to be a lot of people who are going to be left behind, especially the youth. So the digital divide, issues of training, finding decent jobs, and mental well-being of the youth should always be prioritized. I think we can make impact there, because on other, those hard issues, like your UN reforms and all, of course they are very important, the Security Council and all that, but we need to start somewhere at the level of the understanding that certain people, youth in their villages, in the periphery, like the sister said not so long ago, do not really have those opportunities to understand the issues of your Security Council reforms. But if we can start with the basic things that the youth understand, and then we can make an impact. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mwenda. Thank you for those remarks. I think it's very true what you'll say in terms of that it's a very layered thing. How you engage your average citizen in South Africa and China, and the issues you engage them on matters very much, because people care about the issues that affect their lives. And that is primary when compared to, for example, the macro issues. So I believe in this forum today, we'll be discussing at both levels, the macro and the micro, but with the intention of understanding where young people can come in both China and in South Africa. And I see some great comments being made in the chat about ways to overcome some of these challenges. Of course, we've spoken now about youth in the rural areas. Even though, having been to China myself, I know that even though China is a very developed nation, and as developing countries, we look up to China for its massive leaps that it's made in the last few decades, there are still very many areas of China that suffer from poverty. There are still rural areas in China. There are still youth there. And so there's really a conversation to be had about how we include those youth from both South Africa and China in benefiting from BRICS and its initiatives. And then thank you to Ms. Mohale for her interventions as well, in terms of really focusing on what's tangible in terms of addressing the limitations of reaching these areas. With that, I will then close our plenary session with our speakers. I'd like to thank them for their time. This is, of course, a Saturday. And so we really appreciate that they took the time to come and be with us to share their insights as we now move into the second half of today's session, which is the interactive discussions. This will be the bulk of the rest of our program and forms a very important part of the follow-up of today's South Africa-China Youth Forum. And in that, I would then like to briefly, before I let our speakers leave us for the day, I would then like to touch on why we are here today, so that they may also note this. This is something that we want to continue to work on with our partners, all the partner organizations represented here among the youth, but also, of course, our partners in BRICS, the NYDA, and other government agencies. So what I would then like us to reflect on is just why we are here. You have been invited by the South African BRICS Youth Association to attend this session. As you would have seen, the session is not a standard webinar in the way that you might be used to. We, of course, value the input of experts, and that's why we've invited DIRCO and the NYDA to come and make contributions to give context to our discussion. But that is not the purpose, the ultimate purpose of today's forum. So as you can see here, outlined on this slide is a roadmap. And this is the roadmap that we want to share with you as delegates, with you as partners, and of course with DIRCO and the NYDA. You would also note that I keep referring to our colleagues here in the room as delegates rather than participants. And the reason for that is because we don't just see you as participating in what we are doing. We see this as a collective effort in building something new, in building something that has not existed before. So even when we are receiving our remarks from colleagues from DIRCO and NYDA, it is not as though they are dictating to us what is the truth, what should be done. They are giving contributions to a much broader project based on their expertise that we will now embark on, and we would like to invite you as young people from South Africa and China to be part of. So I would then like to draw your attention to the slide that I'm currently sharing. And as you will see, the BRICS flags are all represented there. And this, of course, represents the various youth forums that Sabia will be hosting in the coming months. We are, of course, now in the month of March. And in the month of March, we are hosting our South Africa-China Forum with stakeholders from both South Africa and China represented here today. In the coming months, in April, we will also be hosting our South Africa-India Youth Forum, where we will do the same process, inviting South African key stakeholders and youth that have a relevant interest or expertise on SA-India relations, as well as experts and high-level officials from these countries to come and contribute to this forum, to have discussions on topics that are relevant to South Africa-India youth relations. We will have the same process for Brazil taking place in May. And then finally, in June, we will have our South Africa-Russia Youth Forum. Now, what is the purpose of all of these youth forums that we are having? They are not intended to be merely talk shops where we come together and speak on important issues and then leave. All of this, from Sabia's perspective, is building up to the very important South Africa BRICS presidency of 2023. Colleagues might know that in 2023, South Africa will be the president of the BRICS group, and so we'll be able to set the agenda and host the events that BRICS hosts every year. So for Sabia, this is very important that we ensure that youth voices are represented, that youth activities are actively ongoing, and that youth benefit from this unique opportunity that comes only every 5 years. And this is very important because in BRICS conversations, you'll see that people keep referring back to, in a South African context, keep referring back to 2018. And that's, of course, the last time that we hosted it. So these youth forums that we are currently having, along with this one, are actually inaugural forums with the intention of including all of you as delegates at your discretion, of course, in future conversations and future collaborations and working groups to prepare for the South Africa BRICS presidency of 2023, both South African youth and also youth within the BRICS countries, China, Russia, Brazil, and India. So this sets the stage for our next conversation, and we wanted to share this with our colleagues from NYDA and from DIRCO, and we will be doing follow-ups after this forum on this. So with that, I would then like to thank Mr. Mwenda and Ms. Mohale for their time, and I would like to allow them to leave the session, as I know they have other commitments to attend to as well. So thank you so much for your time, and we'll give you a moment to step out of the room. With that, we are then going to be moving into a short break. This break will allow us to prepare for the breakaway sessions that will take place in a moment. So we appreciate your patience. You can have something to drink, have a bit of a rest before we move into the in-depth discussion component of today's session. And I'll be giving a brief overview of what that will look like as soon as we get back from our break. So you can keep your mic off, you can keep your camera off, and in the next 5 minutes, there will be a signal for you to come back to the main room, and then we will continue with our deliberations.
He's from DIRCO and his BRICS doctorate office, the head of the BRICS doctorate.
I hope I'm muted.
All right, colleagues, that was the signal for us to come back to the main room. So I'd like to invite everyone to come back to the conversation as we will now proceed into our discussion session for today. I hope everyone has had an opportunity to quickly have a rest, quickly run to the restroom, and now we will be moving into our discussion deliberation session. So the way this is going to work is that, of course, we have our 4 topics, and most of our delegates would have received an email which would have indicated to you what your designated working topic is, either based on your experience, your interest, or your responses during the application process. So we ask that you please adhere to this and go to the allocated room for the topic that you've been assigned. Our 4 topics, just to remind you, are, of course, COVID-19 response in the Global South, climate change and action, 4th industrial revolution and digital transformation, and finally, the reform of multilateral governance. So you will be receiving a notification to join breakaway rooms, and they've been named accordingly. So they've been named COVID-19, 4th industrial revolution, climate change, and the final one, multilateral reform. And so you can join the one that you have been allocated. For some of our guests who have not been allocated to a room, you may choose one based on your interest. But of course, this is at the discretion of our organizing team, because we don't want the breakaway rooms to be too large so that we can hear from everyone. Our breakaway sessions will, of course, be facilitated by our facilitation team, who you can see here. These are our 5 facilitators, so you will see their faces, and you will have an opportunity to engage with them during this discussion session. The way this will work is there will be 3 rounds of discussion, a first round, a second round, and a third round. Each round, there will be a prompt to guide us in our discussions on what we are focusing on in relation to the subtopic. Of course, we don't want the conversation to just go unhinged and in any direction. We want to have a focused discussion so we can leave the forum with a good foundation for the South Africa-China Youth Forum going forward. As we mentioned, this is a long-term initiative, and so this is meant to be the foundation for that. However, before we move into our discussion groups, I would briefly like to engage us in an activity, which is usually something we do in our Sabia platforms, and this is called speed networking. So of course, if this was a normal conference, we would be in person, we would be able to meet people, engage with them, build networks, build contacts. As one of our speakers noted, building networks is one of the most important parts of this process that we are engaged in. And so this is an opportunity for you to do so. So the way that speed networking works is you will be divided into a breakaway room with 1 or 2 other people, and you have the opportunity to briefly introduce yourself, to say who you are, where you're from. The time goes by very fast, so please do remain mindful of that. And we will do this process 2 or 3 times to allow everyone to become familiar with who is in the room. We are, of course, all young leaders from various organizations and in China and South Africa, and it's important that we build rapport with one another. So in this, I would like you to then encourage you to put on your camera, to put on your mic, and for when you are in the session, so that you can meet the person that is in the session with you. So if you will allow me a brief moment for the technical elements of this. So you should be receiving in a moment a notice to go into a breakaway room where you will be able to meet the colleagues that are in that room, briefly introduce yourself, and you will get a prompt to come back. So colleagues should be receiving the note to go into the breakaway room now. You can just accept that, and then you can introduce yourself to the colleagues in the room. I see some of our colleagues are returning. As you can see, that was a very
I
brief
accidentally,
session.
I
Yes.
accidentally pressed leave breakout room.
No, that's perfect. We're going to do another round. Usually the first round goes a bit bumpy because people are still getting used to the mechanics, so that's expected. Our colleagues will be joining us in just a few seconds, and then we're going to do another round, and then everything should go a bit more smoothly. I hope everyone at least got an opportunity to introduce someone in your group, at least one. Can I get an indication, maybe yeses or nos, if you got an opportunity?
Yes.
There was
Oh,
okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
Right, fantastic. I see our colleagues are all back now. So now we're going to do our second round of speed networking. Again, put on your cameras, put on your mics, and we will then move into introducing ourselves. When you receive the prompt to come back into the room, just note that you have 60 seconds before the room will close, so you don't have to come back immediately, you still have 60 seconds. All right, you should be receiving another prompt now to move into another breakaway room. I just see some of our colleagues are now joining us again. Everyone should be back in a second or two.
This meeting is being recorded.
I hope that this time it went a bit smoother and you did get an opportunity to introduce yourself or someone in your room. I see some cards. That's good. So we're going to do one last round. This time I'm just going to make the rooms a bit bigger because I know that there were some people that the system automatically allocated and they were alone, which is very hard to network when you're alone. So just one final opportunity for you to meet other delegates, to engage before we go into the real discussion where we'll have your set discussion group. So you should be receiving the notice now.
Hello, hi.
Hi, Nomfundo. All right, I see our colleagues are back now. Welcome back. I hope that was a good experience for you to meet everyone. You'll be working more closely with some of the individuals in your working group. And so now we will move on to that component of the program for today. So as I mentioned, 3 rounds. They will be much longer than the one you just experienced, of course. And they will be guided by our wonderful facilitators who you might have already met. So colleagues, I would then like us to draw our attention to the first question that we will be addressing in today's discussion component of the South Africa Youth Forum, the South Africa China Youth Forum, is to share your experiences and insights on the issue in the context of South Africa and China. Now, of course, what is the issue? The issue is the subtopic of your specific working group. So to share your insights from your country, from your province, from your city even, and to share some of the comparative insights from both China and from South Africa. So your facilitators will guide you in this process, so there is no need to worry. The conversation will move smoothly and we will get very good insights from you as youth leaders. So if you will give me a moment, I'm going to just set up our working groups, and then you should be able to receive a notification on that. Are there any questions on the process that we will be following now? Any clarifying questions from colleagues? You may unmute yourself and ask your question. As I mentioned, the names of these specific working groups will reflect the topic of that working group. So it's COVID-19, Fourth Industrial Revolution and digital transformation, multilateralism, and then of course, our final topic for the session. If you'll just allow me to set up breakaway rooms. Climate change. So you will receive a notification to enter a room. This is not like the previous session where it automatically allocates to you. You have to actually select the one that you want to go into. Again, please, if you have been allocated to a session, please enter the session that you've been allocated with your colleagues. Thank you very much. And you should be receiving those notifications now to enter the room that you've been allocated. I see there are some colleagues who have not yet chosen a breakaway room. If you could please choose the relevant one that you've been allocated to via email.
Excuse me, sorry, I don't see. Oh, never mind, sorry.
Wei Zhang, do you have a breakaway room? Wei, can you hear me? Bogosni? Can you hear me? Luyolo, do you have a breakaway room? I see there are still some colleagues that do not have a breakaway room. Could you please indicate if you've allocated to one? Hi, Nonjebo. I see you are in the main room. Have you been allocated to a breakaway room?
That went very quick.
Right, welcome colleagues. I hope that was an engaging first session. That was just the introduction and to familiarize ourselves with the issues at hand. For the next component, for the second round, we are going to be doing exactly the same. You will be in the same breakaway room with the same people. So when the opportunity comes, please enter the same one because we don't want people jumping around because the conversation needs to flow naturally. So in the second round, what we're going to do now that we've given a bit of thought to understanding the issue that you've been tasked with, we want to understand what are the most important obstacles and challenges surrounding the issue, this specific issue for South Africa and China. So of course, you've spoken very broadly, you might have mentioned multiple things, but what we really want to in the second round reach is what are the pertinent things? What is the 3, 4, 5 things where we need to address this? And if we address this, then the issue will start to be resolved, or we'll start to see progress on this issue. So building from the previous conversation in the second round, please build on this conversation of what is the most important obstacle and challenge surrounding this specific issue. So you'll be receiving the same notification to go into a breakaway room. Again, I ask that you please go into the same breakaway room so that we can continue the conversation and it can remain natural in its flow. Hi, Brett. Can you hear me? Welcome back, colleagues. We're just going to wait for our other colleagues to join us in the main room before we move on to our next round.
Quick question then, since we're still here. What is LVG? Kagiso.
Sorry, it's LPG, eh? Liquefied petroleum gas.
Sounds like a very interesting conversation that was taking place. Right, colleagues, it seems like all of our delegates have now returned to the main room. So that was the end of our second round, which was focusing on prioritizing the specific challenges facing us and our two countries, China and South Africa, within the various issues that we're discussing in our working groups. Now we're going to move into our final round. Now, the final round is perhaps the most important of today's proceedings, because the final round will consolidate not only the conversation we've been having for 40 minutes now already, but it will also lay the foundation of the South Africa-China Youth Forum. As I mentioned in the beginning, the South Africa-China Youth Forum is meant to be a more long-term project. So this is the inaugural event, and it's something we want all of you to be part of, not only as delegates and as participants, but as active change makers and youth leaders within your communities, within South Africa and China. And so the third round is going to focus specifically on solutions. Now, what I'd like to caution us against is focusing on solutions that are too broad, that are beyond our reach, that are unrealistic. Of course, there are many solutions that we can propose that government should do, that businesses should do, that civil society should do. But of course, this is a youth forum. We are the youth. We represent many different sectors of society. We are youth in academia, youth in the private sector, youth in the public sector. And so we must think from the perspective of youth. If someone told you to start doing something tomorrow and money was not an issue, networks was not an issue, but you know that you as a young person can mobilize to do it, what would that be? And so that's the conversation we're going to go in now. And that's really going to form the final pinnacle and climax of today's youth forum. So I'd like to encourage us, I'm just quickly going to share the prompt as well so we can all see it. So our third round is focusing on how can youth in South Africa and China work together to make progress on this issue. Of course, this is the issue that you're discussing in your working group. Emphasis here is on youth in China and South Africa. There's a lot that South African youth can do. There's a lot that Chinese youth can do. But what can these two youth constituencies do together in that a forum like this South Africa-China Youth Forum can create that unique synergy where we can address some of the challenges you have now prioritized in your previous conversation. And so the facilitators are going to be taking very detailed notes of the comments that you're making, because this is going to form part of the foundation of the follow-up from this forum. So I encourage active participation. As I've seen already, I've been moving through the groups and everyone's been participating, and we're very grateful for that. But this is the opportunity for you to take ownership of the forum. It's no longer just Sabia's forum now, it is your forum as a young leader in China and South Africa. So the breakaway rooms will be open now again for the final round of our discussion today. And then we will come back to the main room for a final consolidation and closing of our forum.
Hi, Leon.
Hi, Lesedi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, cool. Yeah, we're just doing the breakaway sessions now, so you're free to join any session if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm taking the 4R one. I was here in the morning. Just that I'm having so many meetings, so I'm juggling between the meetings.
Okay,
But I think I can take 4R. Let me just join them.
great. Hi, Nolutando.
Hi, I've joined with my laptop. I'm
I
on
see
the
you're
working
in and
group
out.
also.
I see you're in and out. Are you good to, is your connection good for the final session? Can you hear me?
Sorry, I was muted. Hi, Rion.
Hi, yeah.
No, I've joined with both my phone and my laptop because I was trying to put in a background for myself. But
Oh,
I'm on
okay.
the working group. I was just participating now.
Okay, cool. But you're all good to do the closing remarks, right?
You know, I have such a bad connection today for whatever reason. But I think I will be, hopefully.
Okay, let's see how it goes.
Yeah, I'll alert you in like 15 minutes. Let me see how I go. And then otherwise I thought maybe P-Way or yourself can then do the closing if possible.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
we're doing well though. We
Yeah,
have
I
a lot
think
of
so.
trainees on our group, so it's really nice.
Yeah, I think there's really a room for. All right, the recording is still going, so I'm just gonna.
Okay,
We'll chat
stop.
after.
All right, okay, cool. Rion,
Yes, Nolutando.
I'm gonna text you on WhatsApp now.
Okay, the participants should be coming back in a moment. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed your final round of discussions. I know with these kind of discussions, time is always too short, but I think this is a good start to what we've been doing at today's session and the work that will continue going forward. So I would just then like to thank our facilitators for handling the breakaway rooms and for taking our delegates into such capable hands. We're now going to move into a brief feedback because, of course, I'm sure other participants are curious what other working groups have been discussing and what they've identified as the main challenges and also potential solutions. So we're going to take a brief moment to allow each group a maximum of 5 minutes. I believe every group has a designated individual who will be presenting, or the facilitator will be presenting. To give us a brief overview. I am going to be quite strict with time just because we want to respect the time we've taken from our delegates for the day. And so I will then call onto the floor first the working group on COVID-19.
Thank you so much, Rion, for this platform. And I think, so we were still trying to delegate who was going to share in our group, and then time went by that much, but it's okay. I think I can just be able to just share on behalf of our group, just to save time. So we had an interesting round or 3 rounds of deliberations. And I think from both parts, we were able to just share on the understanding of what is it that we are going through. And I think everybody just being here understands what COVID is and the impacts thereof. And some of the things that we touched on, which are obviously just the challenges that we encountered, just the youth employment or unemployment that has increased. And some of the things were that before even COVID, we already had shortages of just clean water and cohabitation, just having space to live. And those are some of the issues that we had even before COVID, and COVID just made them even that much as 2 times worse. Just incentives with regards to different organizations and youth that were not able to youth to get some of those incentives. Traveling became an issue, just traveling from a different town, different country, and some of the students, or just people who were working abroad, were not able to travel back and forth. And some of the things that we highlighted were just communication methods from a government point of view, communicating to just us as people, and just communication around ourselves. That became a problem, and vaccine rollout processes were also not cleared, and then just to elaborate on just restrictions on movement. And when we moved to the solutions that we had or we are having as to how can we mitigate some of the issues that we have, one of them was just financing of youth organization and just being deliberate on that. Youth organization being able to access those incentives, because I think we've seen how when they were introduced to us as people, they were very much excluding young people and youth organizations. Also, clear communication and frequent updates, because some of the things that were raised in our group was that, especially for the students abroad, when it comes to just our websites, I mean, we are always online, but the updates on our website, it's not updated, So those are the things that we need to be deliberate on in terms of just updating our websites and information that is there, because some of the things that came about when the COVID hit, people didn't know where to go or who to contact, because that information was not there, it was not shared. And even today, just the basic thing of just updating a website. And also, we touched on the fact that we are just being deliberate as SABIA to include ourselves on the broader BRICS scale of things, which is the BRICS Business Council, and making sure that we have young people who are in these different working groups. Because one of the things that we have seen is that we do not have a participation of young people. So, and the young people's voice then ends up not being heard because we don't have them. But now, as SABIA, we made it deliberate to just make sure that young people are included and are participating. And also just sharing of information with all the other youth groups, because sometimes all you have is just information, but just make sure that you're sharing that information. And also being deliberate in terms of youth exchange programs and skill programs, because most of the time it's people go to different countries with a different set of skills, but when they come back, they don't know where to go. So maybe just to identify organizations that we can be able to work with in order to make sure that we have a skill program. But some of the other things that we touched on, because we know very well that we do not have enough resources to cater to everyone. And some of the issues that we had touched on was young people in the rural areas. How do we make sure that they have access? And some of the solutions were that we already have some infrastructure that is there, be it your town halls, be it your libraries, be it your chief residency, whatever the case might be. Can't we then capacitate some of those infrastructure to make sure that young people do have access to get data, to get electricity, because we are not where we want to be in terms of making sure that each individual household has the capacity. But if we are able to have smaller groupings, because sometimes they take a long time to get to a school, but a town hall might be closer than a school. So how do we capacitate such infrastructure to make sure that our young people are able to access that information and to be able to get that? Because COVID has already made an impact, but we need to make sure that we still are able to move forward in terms of that. So those are some of the things that we're able to touch on. And I think everybody contributed so much. And also in terms of just the vaccine rollout and how most countries, both countries were able to put measures in place in terms of vaccine rollout, and also just making sure that people adhere to the COVID regulations. So we ticked some boxes in terms of saying these were done right and these we can be able to improve on.
All right, thank you so much for that feedback. I think we will then, just for the sake of time, move to the next one. But what I do want to encourage our delegates to do is, if you have any other comments that you feel you have not had an opportunity to elaborate on or to expand on, we will be sharing a link in the chat. So this goes to a Google form where you will be able to share additional reflections on the challenges and also the solutions that have been suggested. Like I mentioned, this information is very important because it's going to form the foundation of the South African China Youth Forum, of which this is the inaugural session. There will also be an opportunity in that link for you to indicate whether you would be interested in becoming a long-term delegate and member of the South Africa China Youth Forum, and then we will contact you with additional information. But just moving ahead then, I think I'm going to call on the Fourth Industrial Revolution Working Group to come and share some of their insights with us. Not sure who has been. Okay.
Hi, sorry. I was reading our slide, or rather the information that I'm going to present to you. Please give me a few seconds. All right. So some of the challenges that we identified is access to technology. Can everyone hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thanks, guys. So we spoke about, access to technology and that being a challenge specifically for youth in the rural areas as well as townships. And we also mentioned how technology can create opportunities if these young people had access to that. And part of that challenge is obviously the infrastructure that's needed in these areas. And therefore, you would have to put in the infrastructure so that the young people can access different segments of the fourth industrial revolution. So be it Wi-Fi, be it opportunities to code, be it being in systems development and all of that. We also spoke about the challenge of misusing technology. So we've recognized that in some areas, schools, for instance, do have Wi-Fi. However, the school kids would probably misuse this technology by, for instance, looking at porn websites. And so when you have access to technology and you have access to opportunities, how do we then help these kids not misuse what they already have, instead use it for solutioning, for instance, for societal issues. Then we also spoke about best practice and legislation that would need to be put in place. We discussed how China uses TikTok and how they probably cap the time that their youth or society has to view videos on TikTok, and that we recognize the dangers that are associated with spending too much time as well on the screen, which is related to mental health issues. And the most time you spend on the screen, the more that your chances are to have mental issues. So we need best practice and to teach that as well to the youth when giving them access to these resources. We also spoke about building bilateral relationships with Asia and using some of their solutions to and implement them here. I mean, one of our colleagues, Neil, spoke about a case study that he will share that speaks about how social grants are digitized in India. And I believe that's a great solution for a country such as South Africa, where majority of people do rely on the state, on state funding in one form or another. So the solutions that we came up with is public and private partnerships, and that speaks to utilizing what we already have. So in private companies, you have, what the best candidates, or you have the best human capital who know IT, who are data analysts, who are business analysts, and they can volunteer their time to go into townships or in schools or community centers and do a skills transfer where they teach these young people about the benefits of having technology, and that would bring some form of digital transformation into those areas. Then we also spoke about partnering with NGOs and also distributing information. I think this one also speaks to having access to information, but not knowing where it is. And one of our colleagues spoke about developing a digital reciprocity. Is it reciprocity or repository, sorry. Having a repository where it has all the information that you need that is related to IT related conversations. So that when someone from the rural area or township goes to a community center, they can just go into this website that has all the information and the opportunities pertaining to anything that speaks about 4IR. We also spoke about a solution, which is, I think, dear to my heart, which is mentorship, taking on 1 or 2 young people, bringing them to sessions such as these, showing them how Zoom works and how you have Zoom meetings. And that's for them an introduction into technology in one form or another. And also reaching out to small communities and using the existing structures and knowledge that we have would be some of the solutions that we came up with for the digital transformation for working group, rather.
Thank you for that. I think you guys have touched on a lot of pertinent things. I like the focus on the mental health of youth and the effect of technology on that and the role of mentorship. I think Mr. Mwenda in his speech this morning also touched on that, because we often talk about international relations in this broad sense, but these are the real human being issues, understanding how youth are using the technology. And there's a lot of opportunity initially that I can see the South African China Youth Forum actually implementing projects around this in schools and communities, mentorship. And so there's a great opportunity. And as Viziwe in our previous presentation mentioned, utilizing the connections that Sabia has with the Civil BRICS Forum, with the BRICS Business Council, those kind of initiatives. So thank you very much, Bungiwe, for that presentation. All right, so now I will call on the climate change group for their presentation of their conversations that they were having. Again, I remind everyone that the link to share your additional thoughts and to indicate your interest in becoming a permanent member of the South African China Youth Forum is in the chat.
Thank you, Rian. We identified 3 challenges, and this was after a dynamic conversation on both countries. So these are challenges that are parallel in China and South Africa. The first was the challenge of education and communication on climate change as a priority. So we identified that this could be even more of a challenge because of the digital access gap. And the third challenge was the economic effects of climate change. The solutions that we discussed, the first being having community engagements in person. This might be a very traditional way of going about it, but it really goes beyond the digital access gap. And we could utilize access